Hey guys, and hey mom. I don't usually get to say
Hi.
that part. Everybody, welcome to Red Wine and Blues Uncorked, where we talk about politics and life stuff and all the stuff in between that we navigate in our lives as we're engaging in politics. So I'm really excited tonight to have my mom, Dr. Stephanie Citron, joining us tonight because everything we have been taking in from you guys over the last week or so has to do with the stress and anxiety. And let's be real, like feelings of depression. There's some intense post-election stuff going on out there in the middle of a pandemic, as expressed by my 2-year-old. I don't know if you just heard that yelling, but it felt like a sign of stress. We're all feeling it no matter the age. So my mom is a clinical psychologist. She has been my whole life. I'm really happy to share her wisdom with you tonight. She specializes actually in trauma and resiliency. And I'll be honest, I did not appreciate that about her until I don't know, Mom, what do you think? Sometime in college, I think
Yeah.
realized that I could learn something from you about the internal stuff. I mean, obviously you raised me and dealt with all my feelings, but in a sort of like understanding the wisdom that your mom can help guide you with. I think it's been a good 20 plus years now that I've been appreciating that. So Mom, how are you? Welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. This is fun.
Yeah, I mean, it is fun, right? I mean, connecting with each other. It's usually you guys all like debrief with my mom after I do these things. Like, what did you think? Um, did you like the lipstick I put on? How was my hair? The really important stuff
Right.
first.
Let's just get down to it.
Yeah, exactly. But then we always debrief on these conversations, as I do with so many of you. So we are 1 week. I'm sorry. It feels like it's only been a week. It's been a month, you guys, since the election. And now we're about a month out from the Georgia runoff election. And I want to talk about something tonight. We talked a lot in the months leading up to November about like voting as self-care. And I think it's important to me anyway. This is part of how I'm getting through things. We'll find out from my mom if this is healthy. But just it's trying to stay in it, like thinking about engagement as a form of self-care. And that means connecting with each other in this community, with other people in your life. And we have a number of ways of doing that, of becoming involved. So I'm just going to plug a couple of things. I don't know, Beverly, if you can put them up on screen. But if you haven't donated yet, at drinkcheapwine.com, which is this is the fund we created to split the funds between the Warnock and Ossoff campaigns and Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight. And the idea here is that, come on, ladies, just for a month or so, set aside the good stuff, pick up the $2 check, and donate the rest. All the savings need to go to drinkcheapwine.com to help out in Georgia. And there's so much more you can do too, because you may know people in Georgia, or you may live in Georgia. We know thousands of you in our groups live in Georgia. And so we need you to be tapping your networks, using that suburban woman power to be in touch with the people that you know, because that is how we get people to act. It's through our relationships. And that's also another way of connecting with people. So if you want to get involved in tapping your voice, using your networks to help make sure that we can finish this thing off and bring true change in January, go to redwine.blue/peaches, like a Georgia peach, which, by the way, this woman right here gave birth to me in the state of Georgia. Lived there for about 15 years, right, Mom?
Yep.
So this is very personal for us. We've got so many family and friends in Georgia, and we're really going to be, we're tapping our voices to help bring it home. So we're asking you to join us. And we also have our app, of course, for any of you who are not on it yet, to please download. And there's all kinds of actions you can take between now and January 5th to help out in Georgia there too. And even after this conversation tonight, we are even going to be leading into a Zoom party conversation where all women are going to be getting together, and we will all be texting like mom to mom, grandma to grandma, women in Georgia, to help support making sure that all the young people are registered to vote. They have till Monday to do that. And there will just be opportunities, really like almost every day of the week, to take action together. Okay. So like we're all feeling isolated. You don't have to feel isolated when you do this. Let's take care of each other and ourselves and do things together. Okay. All right. That's my little plug at the top. But mom, I just play when on TV, like a person who talks about feelings and like getting through stuff. Time for the expertise. Okay, mom. So there's just so much talk here. I actually often before I do these interviews, I'll go into one of our Facebook groups and I'll say, okay, here's who I'm having on tonight. I said, my mom is coming on, clinical psychologist, specializes in trauma and resiliency. What should I ask her? And I've never seen a response come so fast and furious, actually, what I got from women. I mean, people are really experiencing intense stuff. The impact of this election has been personal. The impact of this pandemic is so personal on who we can see, who we can't see, how people are treating the virus, whether or not they take it seriously, knowing that someone within our own household voted differently from us in an election where just it made us feel so far apart. This is having real impacts on marriages, on all kinds of relationships within families, within friendships. And so I'm just hearing that the whole idea of seasonal stress, seasonal depression, that's a thing, right? But right now it's so compounded by the pandemic, by post-election dynamics, to really being anywhere from low grade to quite high grade levels of anxiety and stress. So first, let's start with you, mom. Like, what do you do when you first feel those feelings? And let's admit, during this pandemic, we've all had some low grade stuff going on all the time, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But speak for yourself. I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Like, what does it feel like and what do you do?
Well, first of all, I mean, that I've certainly experienced anxiety. And during this pandemic, I have felt both anxious at times and depressed at times. But anxiety, the thing I first ask myself when I'm noticing that I'm anxious is I ask myself, okay, what's the threat that I'm experiencing? Something is jolting my nervous system and it is throwing me into some form of fight or flight. So I ask myself, what's the threat? Like even before doing this, and just like an hour ago, I'm running around in the kitchen and Dan says, wow, you are buzzing, and I thought to myself, what's the biggest threat? And I thought, I think the threat is that I might feel like I really blow it on this thing. So that's, and asking myself that, and then kind of thinking about, wait a minute, what's this all about? What are we really here for? And how good it feels to be able to do something with you. And I just kind of sensed into my body thinking, wow, Katie and I get to do something here that could even maybe even make a little bit of a difference for other women that are on the call. So that kind of helped settle me.
Okay, so that's interesting to me because I think that sometimes when we feel that sense of anxiety, we say, stop feeling that. No, just put your head down, keep doing, work through it, just get through it. And then, the kids will go down to bed. You'll be able to, it'll be done. And we'll get up and do another day. But I don't think you're telling us that that's really the answer.
Well, I think that I actually don't think it's as efficient. Sometimes we do have to power through. Sometimes, but often that question about asking ourselves, what is the threat to me right now, is that first of all, we're appreciating that if there is a threat, it's functioning like a jolt to our nervous system. And when that happens, our nervous system leaves this place of resilience and goes into either sympathetic nervous system activation, which is anxiety of being mobilized for action and feeling either anxious or irritable or angry or just constantly on the lookout for what's going on next. Or it can go down into parasympathetic shutdown, where we are just either frozen and we can't get off the couch, or we just give in to whatever is going on, or just like totally give up. So,
and it sounds like if we don't think about where the threat is coming from, we can go to that place more easily because the threat just keeps coming. So talk about like the
Right.
different
So
kinds of threats.
you're going to power through still feeling anxious, and whoever's around you will feel it too.
Right.
Go ahead. What was this?
So in terms of different kinds of threats, because I think that word can be confusing. People might think, well, I'm not threatened directly. There's no physical threat, but what do you mean by the kinds of threats kind of in this day-to-day pandemic,
All right.
post-election
Yeah.
stress life?
Let's think about this. We are functionally in a natural disaster in this pandemic. And this really qualifies what we call is a big trauma. And a big trauma is something that is too much, too fast, or too long. And that's what's happening here. Too much, too fast, for too long.
Yeah.
And that can feel like a real threat to our ability, because what we know is we're living in two realities about what science is telling us right now. First of all, what science is telling us to be able to avoid infection is to social distance. And the other thing science tells us is that what we can do when we're facing adversity to increase our resilience is to strengthen our social relationships. So we've got two opposing things that science is telling us are essential for our well-being.
Yeah. Well, talk about, speaking of the science, something I always find so interesting is when you talk about like what is actually going on in our brains when we experience these feelings, when we experience a threat.
Okay.
That if we don't address it, is going to result in this fight or flight rather than finding that place of resilience.
That's right. So with the pandemic, the threat, there's so much threat that's happening in terms of how we're going to manage the kids, how we're going to manage work, how we're going to stay safe. And so what happens is that when we experience that threat to our own health and well-being and the people that we love, or it could be our economic well-being, or the social isolation that we feel from families, all of that is a threat to our well-being. And
Right.
so
Or the stress in a relationship over the fact that someone you love has voted for Trump, and that
that's
is
right.
hard to process, or that they are not taking COVID precautions seriously. And again,
Yes.
creating that distance, and it's someone that we've been close to, or the stress of caring for an older parent, or a child with disabilities. I mean, any of these things, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think in terms of post-election stuff, it's like there's a threat to the relationship if there's a family member or someone that we want to stay in connection with that has voted for Trump, or that there's a threat to the stability of the relationship, because this political season has been, I think, particularly unusual, because so many of us that have been working as progressive Democrats have really been trying to get away from what we experience as a very toxic president, which is different than trying to work to get someone elected that would be preferable because of our positions. But I think it's that Trump's presidency has posed more of a threat to many of us in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So in terms of how this affects the brain, is that when we experience this threat of danger, 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 we're not okay. We're not getting to be in our world the way we're used to it. Our world is not safe. We could get this infection, someone we love could, and it's not even safe in our regular relationships if somebody's has a very disparate political view. And so when we don't feel the safety, the amygdala in the brain starts ringing like a smoke alarm and says, danger, danger, danger. And it sends a message to what we call the survival brain, which is at the base of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And in the survival brain is the autonomic nervous system. And so it sends this message to the autonomic nervous system, and it says, what you need to do in the face of danger is mobilize for action. So go into this fight or flight mode and get ready to save your own life. And so fight or flight, when you're being chased by a lion, is going to be running away, right? But fight or flight, when you are feeling chased by the threat of a disease may be battening down the hatches and not letting yourself go anywhere, and then maybe staying stuck in a place of pretty constant anxiety
Hmm.
and not being able to really get back into that place of resilience where we can think.
Relatable.
And then we get really confused and our brain gets muddy and it's really hard to figure out what to do next. And if we can't complete a fight or flight response, we'll go into this shutdown place where we just have no energy and it just feels miserable. And in terms of this fight or flight thing, I think it's really interesting. I was reading something the other day that normally about 20% of Americans report that they have anxiety or depression. Then in May of this year, 35% reported. In July, 40% reported. And now, basically, we're saying that really most Americans have what we call an adjustment disorder with anxiety and depression, which means that we're adjusting to an external threat.
Okay, ladies, do you hear that? You are not alone. No wonder so many of you responded to my Facebook post.
That's right. And if everybody is feeling like out of balance, guess what? You are a human being, and this is a normal response, and your nervous system is doing what it is designed to do.
Yeah.
Because we're all, and I'm talking to a lot of moms here, and that we are protectors, and we are protectors of our children and of our families and of our own lives and the people that we love. And we are going to go into fight or flight when we experience that threat. So this is all of us, absolutely all of us.
So let's speak directly to your advice for moms who are caretaking and really worn out. Kristen, one of the women in one of our groups today, said she's dealing with a demanding disabled parent, a very anxious teenager, and a stressed out husband who is working from home. How do we support others when we are struggling ourselves and aren't our best? She said she's trying to put on that happy face. She's trying to say we're having a good time, it's all fun, but it's like digging deep is feeling really hard, because we're all just barely holding it together ourselves. How do we do it? That's the expectation on the moms all the time, to hold it together for everybody else. And it's so hard. What's your advice?
My advice is what the airlines tell us to do. Put your own mask on first. Okay. When there is turbulence, when you need oxygen, if that mama doesn't have her mask on and getting my oxygen, she's passed out and nobody's taking care of that child. And so what we have to do is regulate our own nervous system first. And this is not to say that I am not advertising to everybody that you need to just take so much time every day for self-care. I know what it's like to be a working mom, to have kids that have needs, to have parents that have needs, to have husbands that have needs. And you can do a lot for yourself in a very short time to promote your own resilience. And
so let's talk about some of that, like the practical, what you can do in a short time, because I got a lot of just asks about that too. Like, what are ways to check in with myself, like especially headed in to these holidays where it's just, we feel like it's all going to ramp up. We're not going to have the family support, but we're still going to be trying to create the magical experience for our kids. So let's talk about strategies.
Okay. So there's a whole bunch of very simple things that we can do. First of all, when we're feeling anxiety, the first thing we need to do, if we have kids the behavior is bad and they're just a mess all over the place, if we're not grounded and if we can't ground ourselves, I mean, sometimes it's just like, if you take your chair right now, like I'm doing with mine, I am going to put both of my hands on the chair and pull up on the chair. And just pull.
I'm sitting cross-legged. I have to.
Okay. All right. So pull up on the chair and just notice how the chair is supporting us and let go. What happens?
I feel a little more supported.
And you took a breath. Yeah. So they're really small things we can do to ground. We can move. We can push up against a wall. But and there are just a whole bunch of other little things we can do. We can resource, which means that we look for the low-hanging fruit of anything during our day that for even 10 seconds feels good. It might be noticing our morning coffee and just how good that tastes. or it might be noticing the sun coming up or going down, or it might be making sure, and I think it's so important to get out. When I say getting out in nature, I don't mean somebody has to go to a park. I mean, get out in your yard, get out on your block, but get outside every day. Because in this time of social isolation, it is so important to not feel like we are just crammed in between these walls. I think the other thing is that I think moms feel a lot of shame about how they're not being productive enough, they're not being creative enough, they're not being
Preach.
patient enough, they're not being present enough because there's so much going on. And we're feeling our own sense sometimes of anxiety and depression and despair and grief sometimes because of everything that's going on. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that haven't been able to visit parents in the hospital or attend a funeral or be able to have a holiday. I mean, I certainly felt it from the other end. We were supposed to be with you guys over Thanksgiving and we were all by ourselves, and that really, it stank, it just, and so it's hard, but it's like, so I think that what we have to do is take those tiny few seconds of anything that feels good, but also sense into our bodies when it's something that feels good. Because really, when you think about it, trauma affects our body, mind, and spirit. And every single aspect of our bodies and our minds and our spirits actually are affected by all of this coming at us. And so I think it's really important to be able to take whatever moments of anything that feels positive and sense into our bodies, because it's our bodies that feel the pain of the loss and the worry. And it is our bodies that can also get reset into a place of greater resilience when we can sense into anything that feels good. So it's not just looking for the silver lining, but it's actually, as we experience any little thing that is happening, a goofy thing that your son does, or a phone call that felt good, or a text you got from a friend, or and then I think it's also about experiencing compassion for ourselves, because it's so easy to, that's what I was saying about feeling the shame of falling short as a mom. There's not one mom that I've talked to that doesn't feel horrible shame that their kids are on screens more than they should be, or that they're on screens more than they should be. We need to work at this, and it is also we're in a national disaster. We are in a pandemic, and so things are going to be a little ragged, and we need to really offer compassion to ourselves and to one another. Like, we're doing the best we can. We don't have to say, oh, it doesn't matter, they'll be fine. We know the pros and cons of a lot of this stuff. It's not ideal, but we are doing the best we can.
Yeah. I think so often for myself, when I'm experience stress, like for me, I often I feel it in my gut, kind of I have a stomach ache. I often get tightness in my jaw, and I'm very aware of the physical manifestations of negative or just hard feeling stress, and I think that's sort of how I physically process some of this fight or flight stuff. I think what I don't do is notice as much the positive physical feelings that come with those moments of, the hilarious thing the kids do, or, joy in experiencing, a moment with Jeremy. It's like I think that, or a friend, we sort of, I think we experience those at a more mental level, maybe, we're like, oh, that was funny. That was so hilarious. Like the things kids do, but we don't, I'll just say for myself, I don't think I notice in those moments, like maybe the relief it might bring to my jaw, and how maybe my, where else I feel more grounded, or more lightness of being. And I wonder if I can try to notice those things as much as the, oh, my stomach hurts things, if there's some way to balance that out.
It does balance it out. And I mean, science has shown this. Neuroscience shows us that when we sense in to something positive in our bodies, it actually regulates the nervous system. The reason why we sense into all this stuff that's negative is that amygdala in our emotional brain is actually wired for negativity. It's like searchlighting all the time because it's keeping us alive. It's like, okay, what is out there that's going to get it? It's going to be able to keep us alive. So, but what we're wanting to be able to do is to be able to think clearly, right? And to be able to be creative and to move forward. But we can't do that unless we are in a resilient place. And that's not because, they've actually done these fMRI studies to show that when we're in our survival brain, we're not getting much blood to the prefrontal cortex. So we actually, if you're feeling like I can't think well and I'm not doing well here, you're not getting enough blood up there to the prefrontal cortex, which has all that executive functioning. If you want to get the blood up there, you've got to re-regulate the nervous system and sense in to what is positive, and also sense into what you're noticing if there is anything that is helping you right now.
So it's a matter of sensing in both in terms of how we're thinking as well as these physical ways of pulling, I think there's both physical and mental ways, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yes. And it's also sensing in to what it's like to connect. Because when we connect with each other, that's what we're doing. If we have the biggest thing we can do to increase resilience is to be able to strengthen our relationships. And we do that through connecting with one another.
Yeah.
So when Kristen was saying, how do I help my friends when I can't help myself? Sometimes it's saying to your friend, you know what, that sounds like it really sucks. I don't blame you for feeling that way at all. This is a really hard time.
Yeah, totally.
You don't
absolutely.
have to make it about you. You don't have to tell them that you don't have to give advice.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a perfect segue. Actually, this has gone by very fast for me. I hope it has been as helpful for you guys, Mom. And I feel like I'm going to sense into the good feelings I've had in this conversation with you. Thank you. I want to bring on Julie, our organizing director at Red, White, and Blue, because hey, you guys have had a socially distant meetup on the deck over when the weather was nice. Anyway, so we are speaking of finding connection with other women and supporting each other, and it not always being about business, but also getting shit done together, but having a good time while we do it. Well, I mean, that's basically Julie is chief of operations of all those things at Red, White, and Blue. So Julie, tell what everybody's invited to come do right now. If you need that sense of connection, like right now.
Okay, right now I'm about to hit send. So it's going into the chat is the link to join us, because we are going to have a tequila and texting party on Zoom. I have my beverage. I have to admit it's rum, because I'm more of a rum fan than a tequila fan, but it is rum. And we are going to get together and we have some really fun actions we can do. If you have friends in Georgia, we've got things you can send to them. If you don't, we've got things you can do. And you get to hang out with a bunch of like-minded, really fun ladies. We're going to chat, have a couple beverages, and take some action. So you'll feel empowered and you'll also have fun and you can relax like Dr. Citron has been telling us to do. So.
All right. So how's that, Mom, for like taking the advice to heart immediately? Like,
that's awesome. You go, Julie.
Yep. It's going to be fun. We always have a good time.
Awesome. All right, Julie, go open that Zoom room.
Okay.
And you guys, Julie is always a good time. All right. So Mom, I want to wrap up with you with just a couple rapid fire questions. We have like 30 seconds left, but I love doing these at the end. Okay. So let me see. I'll get to pick a piece of advice you'd give your teenage self.
Don't be so in such a hurry to find a serious boyfriend.
I love this, Mom. You can be like a half hour of deep thoughts, and then you're just like, here's some boy advice that I wish I had. All right. Your favorite guilty pleasure? Could you pick?
Oh, it would be tough. But I will tell you, my newest guilty pleasure is I made a pumpkin cheesecake with graham cracker, with a ginger snap crust, the crust thing, and I ate half of it by the time Thanksgiving weekend was over. I just found in my throat.
How did you do sensing into your body, and how did it feel?
Oh man, it tasted so good. I mean, I can just taste it right now. I'm salivating. So it was so good.
Sounds amazing. All right, we'll end on this because you are good at helping me remember to practice my gratitude. One thing you're grateful for right now.
I got to say, I really am genuinely so grateful that Joe Biden's going to be our next president. I just feel such tremendous relief. I truly, and as I experience that gratitude, I feel this warmth in my heart and just like shivers down my back. And
and let's not forget to feel that relief. And there's joy there too.
there is.
There's so much
There
work
is.
to do, but the more we can lean into that joy, I think the more powered we're going to be to deliver on the results that are promised here if we all stay in this. Okay, Mom. Thanks for
I'm
coming.
so glad to be with you, Kate. This is so good. I love what you're doing. Love being with you.
Love you, Mom. Bye,
Okay,
everybody.
love you. Bye.